Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Emily Pacheco, and I am one of the co-founders of the AI in College Admission Special Interest Group that's recognized by NACAC. And today I'm helping to moderate a really exciting session that we've put together. We're going to be looking at a really interesting study, looking at navigating college applications with AI, and we're going to look at a specific study related to that. There on the screen, you're going to find a QR code. If you haven't checked out this study already and you'd like to look at it, you can use that code and go directly to the webinar. To the study. So you can use that there. Just a moment, a little bit about AI in college admissions, AICA. We are a community. You can find us online. We have a LinkedIn community. That's the QR code that goes there. If you haven't joined that community, please take a moment, use your phone, go to that group and join it. If you just want to find out a little bit more about who we are, you can look at edhub.ai, and you can find some great information there as well about our organization and about our group. We are very focused on looking at the effects of artificial intelligence on college admissions. Our community is made up of high school, college counselors, independent educational consultants, as well as counselors, academic university admission counselors like myself. So I do like to mention my other role is a regional admission counselor for Case Western Reserve University. So there's a lot of people like myself within this group as well. To get us started today, I do want to start with a quick poll here, just to kind of get us all into the right headspace, thinking about AI in college admissions. I know there's a lot of people here that work with students in that college application process. So here's the first question. Do you think your students are using it to help them in that process? What do you think? So I'm just going to give you all a second there to respond. While you're doing that question, just a couple of things to remember during this webinar. You can use the Q&A at the bottom to put questions whenever you would like. We are going to leave time at the end to try to get to as many of those questions that you have. We did also leave the chat function on. So if you want to throw into the chat where you're coming from today, who you are, what university or school you're with, feel free to put that there. If you have any comments you want the group to see, you're welcome to use the chat function. But we encourage you to use the Q&A for your questions. It's much less likely that they'll get lost if they're in there. So let me share the results of that first poll with you. The people in this room, I feel this group is probably a little bit more AI positive, just the fact that you set aside an hour of your day to look at this research and to delve into this a little bit deeper. And I think the results of this are showing that you feel that your students are using artificial intelligence. Let me pull up, I just have one more poll question here. Where are my poll questions now? Hold on. Oh, there, sorry. Okay. And launching the second one. Launch. Oh, I don't think I can launch the second one. We might just go, there, are you seeing it there or not? Is it up on your screen? No, okay. I'm not able to launch that second one, but that's okay. We'll move forward. We got additional polls a little bit later in our presentation today. So I do want to take a moment to introduce our panelists. I'm so excited. We've got a great group from Foundry 10 today. Jennifer, do you want to get us started? Ella, then Riddhi, and then Catherine, you want to go and just tell us who you are, give us a quick introduction.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jen. I'm a senior researcher at Foundry 10, and as part of that role, I'm also the principal investigator of the Digital Technologies and Education Lab, and we are all here today to present some of our work focused on AI and college admissions. We also do work on social media, as well as generative AI more broadly, and teachers' experiences as well, so feel free to check out our research if you wanted to learn more. I'll pass it on to Ella.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ella, and I'm a postdoctoral research scientist in Jen's lab helping out with this research, and my training is in social psychology.
Hi, everyone. My name is Riddhi Devanji. I am the team lead of the Technology, Media, and Information Literacy team at Foundry 10, and I am an associate researcher in Jen's lab. And pass it to Catherine.
Hi, I'm excited to be here today. My name is Catherine Chen, and I'm an assistant researcher in Jen's lab.
Awesome. We're so excited you're all here. I did get this last question to launch, so we'll go ahead and do one more poll here before we pass over the screen to our panelists. You can go ahead and start answering this one. If you feel how well equipped do you feel in guiding students through how to ethically use artificial intelligence in the college admission process? So yeah, let's see how our audience feels about this. Yeah, and I think it's pretty interesting. Most of us think that they're using it in the process, but the results of the second poll is showing not all of us feel all that equipped or, ready to guide students in how to ethically use it. We feel we've had a little bit of training, a little bit of knowledge in that, but overall, we're not well equipped to deal with that. All right, oh, I'm so sorry I didn't share the results with you. I thought you were looking at the results there too. There are the results, you can see it. Okay, and I'm going to pass over the screen to our panelists. I'm going to go off camera just during this part of the presentation, but I'll come back at the end so that we can moderate a little Q&A conversation there.
Great. Hello, everyone. All right, let's get started with diving into some of our research. So once again, welcome. And we'll be presenting both student and teacher insights and how they use AI in the college admissions process from the last admissions cycle. Just a little bit about who we are before we begin. I mentioned that we work at Foundry 10. We're a research organization based in Seattle, Washington. And we also run programs with youth in schools and out-of-school programs, as well as philanthropy at our organization. And our main goal really is to expand ideas about learning and really centering and creating value for youth in Washington State and beyond. A little overview of today. We're going to talk a little bit about an introduction to generative AI. We'll delve into our methods and the current research. We'll cover some of our findings and practical applications with the note that we covered a lot in the white paper, and I strongly encourage you to read it if you want a full rundown of our results. And we'll end with a few recommendations and a wrap up, leaving time for questions today. Great. I'm going to pass it off to Riddhi, who has a few more polling questions and that will focus on some of the motivation for our study that we have here. So Riddhi, on to you.
Thanks. So we'd love to collect some of your sentiments on the issues that were examined during this study. So please respond to this poll question asking, how comfortable do you feel with the idea of generative AI tools like ChatGPT supporting students in the college admissions process? This is similar to the questions that we explored and asked folks in our research. And it's looking like, with poll responses coming in, oh, they're still moving around quite a bit, but a bit of a bell curve with people feeling mostly comfortable and very comfortable and uncomfortable looking a little similar, and very uncomfortable and neutral being a little bit. It's just the outliers. So, okay. Thank you so much for responding to this poll. That's very interesting, and we're going to keep that in mind as we go through and share our results. We have our next polling question. How comfortable do you feel with the idea of generative AI tools like ChatGPT supporting teacher in writing college letters of recommendation? Our research explored both angles, both students and teachers, and how they're using these tools in the college admissions process, and we wanted to see whether things were different. Okay, so a little less neutral, mostly comfortable, a little bit more comfortable than we were with students' use, which is interesting to note. But still, I guess the very uncomfortable is around 4%, which was for students. So that's a really interesting reporting. Thank you so much for participating in our poll. And yeah, we're excited to see whether or not your response is kind of lined up with what we found in the research.
Great. Let's move on. So we kind of want to start with a little bit of background and some of the motivations for this work. I'm sure it's not a surprise to anyone here that AI and college admissions has been in the news a lot lately. These are some titles from The Nation and New York Times, just really grappling with the question of whether to ban or embrace generative AI in the college admissions process, as well as experimenting and exploring what AI can do for thinking about as a writing partner for essays or exploring colleges, or really helping kind of narrow down a student's choice for majors or what they want to explore in college itself. And just to get everyone on the same page, we're really talking about generative AI in a specific way here. We're referring to generative AI as a type of artificial intelligence that can create new content like art, music, or writing without help from humans by learning from large amounts of data. And we can really nestle generative AI under the larger umbrella of artificial intelligence. If you want a little bit more of a scaffolding, we also can think about it nestled under machine learning as well as deep learning. So it really kind of takes and encompasses all these different attributes into thinking about creating something new and exciting through the use of an application like ChatGPT or Claude or Midjourney. And just some more examples, I'm sure you've all heard of ChatGPT and Claude, perhaps Gemini is both text and chat generation type content, but we also have image generation such as DALL-E, Midjourney, and OpenArt. And we also can think about writing and editing help. Grammarly, for example, is an AI tool. It often does provide predicative use of text as well as writing suggestions using an AI model. And that's just another example about a tool that might be more readily already integrated into the type of work that we already do. Maybe some people don't realize that it does use AI as part of its product. So the 2024-2025 season marks the first time that generative AI was really widely accessible to college students. Generative AI, let's think ChatGPT, came out in November 2022, but that was well into that admission season. So we really wanted to capture this moment in time when a new tool was fully introduced during an admission cycle. We can really think about generative AI as two sides of the debate, and we've conducted lots of focus groups with educators as well as students, and these are some of the themes that have come up time and time again with that research that we've done. So first is this idea that generative AI can equalize opportunities in college admissions, that it can really level the playing field for students who might not have access to something like a college admissions coach or caregivers and parents at home who might be able to help direct them on the college admissions process. But on the other side of this debate is that it can also provide perhaps an unfair advantage to students who might know how to use generative AI or might produce content that really borders on if it's responsible and ethical use, something that we're going to dive into later today. But I do want to kind of highlight that this debate around generative AI may really overshadow a deeper issue, and that's inequity favoring those with more resources in the college admissions cycle. We know that things like college admissions coach that are often paid, tutors, we can also think about guidance counselors in better resource schools, as well as parents, family members, and colleagues of parents that might be able to help provide some of this background to the college admissions process or help with that personal essay, but not all students have access to these resources. We can also think about how introducing a new tool that's widely available might challenge kind of some of the structure that we see in college admissions overall. All right, I'm going to dive into our methods, how we got this data, and then also a little bit about some of our highlights of our major findings. So this research really explores high school seniors and teachers that teach high school use of Gen AI in the college admissions process, along with the associated ethical considerations that take place with using tools like these. And our major research questions were, how do high school students and teachers use generative AI tools in the college admissions process, and what are the ethical considerations associated with this use? And to do this, we launched a nationwide online survey, partnering with Sago, who's one of our recruitment partners that we use to gather high quality data. And here we had 425 high school teachers nationally and 523 high school students ages 16 to 18 who applied to college in the 2024-2025 application cycle. And what we explored, we had several areas in the survey. One of the major areas we looked at was AI and applications. So this is student and teacher use of Gen AI in college admissions. We also looked at ethics and perceptions, so views on the authenticity and ethics of generative AI as a legitimate form of assistance, as well as access and equity. So thinking about demographic factors that might influence the use and adoption of AI in the college admissions process. All right, I'm going to pass it on to Kat.
All right, so now we're going to dive into some of the findings from the study. So one of our first takeaways is around the students' use of AI. And while most students relied on parents and teachers for help with their college applications, 30% of students in our study did use generative AI tools to help write their college admissions essay. And this really indicates a cautious but growing interest among students in using AI for college admissions. And of the students who used generative AI for their college admissions essays, the activities that they most frequently reported using AI for were brainstorming essay topics, checking grammar and spelling, and creating an essay outline. And fewer participants relied on AI to create whole drafts of their essays. And although the numbers for the percentage of participants who used AI to generate a first draft or a final draft of their essay may look quite large, it is important to remember that these percentages are being drawn from the subset of participants who said that they used AI for their college essays at all. And so looking at all of the students in our survey, only about 9% of the total sample said that they used AI to generate a first draft of their essay, and a little under 6% for a final draft of their essay. Participants who used AI primarily did so to enhance and support their writing quality and efficiency, rather than to fully replace their own efforts in their college essays. So the main reasons that participants who used AI said that they did so were to improve the overall quality of their essay, to perform grammar and spelling checks, and to aid in generating ideas and content. Then on the other hand, for the participants who said they didn't use AI for their college essays, they mainly did that due to a desire for authenticity and ethical concerns, along with doubts about the accuracy and privacy of AI tools. And looking at the charts here, students really had mixed views on the ethics of using generative AI tools in the college admissions process. So students were asked to indicate their level of agreement with two statements. First, it is ethically acceptable for students to use ChatGPT to assist in writing their college admissions essays. And second, it is ethically acceptable for teachers to use ChatGPT in writing letters of recommendation for college admissions applications. So looking at college admissions essays, we really see that most students express some degree of disagreement or neutrality with the idea that using generative AI tools for this purpose is okay, and then a smaller proportion agreeing or strongly agreeing that using AI for this is all right. And then when we turn to letters of recommendation, a very similar pattern emerges. So this really suggests a general hesitance or uncertainty among students about the ethical implications of using AI tools for these purposes. And one important thing to note is that there was no significant difference in students' perceptions of the ethics of students' use and teachers' use of ChatGPT in the college admissions process.
We also wanted to investigate what factors might predict whether a student chose to use AI in their essay writing. And we actually asked about a bunch of potential predictors, including things like race, gender, whether they went to public school or private school, whether their schools provided college admissions support directly, and even the students' overall feelings of writing anxiety. And actually, none of those factors significantly predicted whether a student chose to use AI. The two that we found that were significant were students believing that it's ethically acceptable to do so, and then the income of the families that they came from. And so specifically, when we think about agreeing that using AI for college essays is ethically acceptable, this predicted an increased odds of having used AI in their own essay, which makes sense because in general, people are more likely to do things that they believe are ethical, right? And then looking at family income, specifically students from families earning between $75,000 and $100,000 had higher odds of having used AI for this purpose than those from families earning less than $50,000. And it's important to note here that the other income categories didn't necessarily have significant differences. So it's important that we need to see more research in this space to have conclusive determinations. But this might suggest that students from higher income families are being more exposed to AI and technology, and can therefore be using these as tools. And this could further exacerbate already existing gaps in accessibility of college admissions prep resources. So our second takeaway is that 31% of teachers said that they'd used AI to help write college letters of recommendation, almost exactly the same percentage as students using it for their own essays. So this suggests that both students and teachers are increasingly using AI support for educational tasks like these. And when we asked teachers who had used AI for this purpose why they did it, they mostly endorsed the idea that they were curious about how AI tools could assist in this task. They thought that it could help improve these letters, and they wanted to reduce the stress of writing recommendation letters. And far fewer teachers said that they just wanted to save time during the writing process. We also asked the teachers who said that they didn't use AI why they chose not to. And they said that they mostly had preference for personal touch in recommendation letters, and the ethical implications associated with AI tools were also a primary concern. So then we also asked teachers about the potential opportunities and risks of students using generative AI. And here we can see a long list of potential positive opportunities that we asked them to rate how much they agreed with. And the important thing to note here is that we're seeing that gray neutral category is about a third, and then it's approximately normally distributed, right? We've got about a third agreeing and about a third disagreeing on most of these. And the highest rated ones were the idea that AI could help youth learn to succeed in their future careers and help them ask questions they feel like they can't ask adults. Now, when we asked about risks, it's clear that teachers might be especially sensitive to risks, right, compared to opportunities, because we've seen that that left side of the scale is shrinking, and now there's far more in that agree or strongly agree category for most of these. And when we look at the ones that a majority rated as strongly agree or agree here, we can see that there are more of them. It's stopping youth from being able to solve their own problems, causing them to have problems with teachers, helping them cheat, or giving them inaccurate or false information are the primary risks of concern here. So teachers are perceiving risks and opportunities, but they're especially sensitive to the risks. And then we saw with Catherine's presentation earlier about how students believe that it's approximately the same level of ethics for students and teachers to be, or sorry, for students to be using AI tools to write college essays. Now we're also adding the teacher perspective to that here, and we can see that teachers agree with students. They're both saying it's just a little bit above the midpoint of that 5-point scale. And then we also asked both students and teachers, if we can have another click. We also asked them how ethical it is for teachers to use AI tools to write letters of recommendation. And as you saw before, students said it was pretty much the exact same as the ethics of a student using it to write their essays. But teachers disagree. Teachers in our sample actually thought it was significantly more ethical for them to use AI tools to write letters of recommendation compared to the ethics of students using it to write essays. And this really suggests that students and teachers might be entering these conversations about AI ethics from different assumed baselines of for whom and when it's appropriate to use these tools.
I'm going to lead us into our fourth takeaway, which is thinking about AI bias. So you might have heard Ella mention, and I also have the same training as social psychologist. And in social psychology, we tend to run experiments. And we wanted to run an experiment looking at comparisons between the use of generative AI as well as human help. And what we found was that high school students and teachers showed bias against applicants who used ChatGPT in their college admissions essays compared to other types of assistants. I'm going to walk you through how we did this. So our main question was, how do different forms of assistance influence perceptions of a college admissions essay? So participants, both teachers and students, were randomly assigned into one of three groups. In the first group, participants read a scenario in which a student had the help of a college admissions coach with drafting their college admissions essay. The second scenario was exactly the same, with the only difference that the student used ChatGPT as that source of help. And in the third condition, we had a no help condition. So the student didn't receive help from anyone. It wasn't mentioned computer or human. It was more of a baseline condition. Don't worry, we're going to show you what the scenario looks like. I'm going to pass it off to Catherine to kind of lead us through that.
Yeah, so as Jen just mentioned, each of the participants in the three conditions read about an admissions scenario and then answered some questions about it. And so for the student name in the admissions scenario, we use something called stimulus sampling to see whether there was a difference in participants' perceptions of the student and their work based on the perceived race and gender of the student. And so how we did this is we randomly assigned participants to view one of 24 names associated with 4 racial groups and 2 genders. So on the example here on the slide, Maria Lopez, that was an example of a name associated with being a woman and Latina. And we didn't find any differences, significant differences with the stimulus sampling. So the results that we present on this experiment did held true and are generalizable across various student names, genders, and races. And so here is an example of one of the admission scenarios for the ChatGPT scenario. that participants read about in the actual study. So Maria Lopez is a high school senior applying to colleges this year. While writing her admissions essay, Maria turned to ChatGPT for assistance. ChatGPT aided her in brainstorming ideas, refining content, and polishing the final draft. And then next, participants read the introduction paragraph of that student's essay. And we won't go through the whole thing now for time. If you would like to look at it in more detail, I urge you to look at the white paper. But yeah, for now, we will turn to the findings.
Great. So once again, they read this essay, this introduction paragraph, this fictitious essay, and then they were asked to rate that essay as well as the student who wrote that essay on a variety of different dimensions. I'm going to walk you through some of the examples of what we found. So looking at here, one of the dimensions that we looked at was that competence of the student. So what were participants' perceptions of the competence of the student, in the condition that they were assigned to? So when participants were told that the applicant had used ChatGPT to help write their admissions essay, they perceived the applicant as less competent than those that had help from a college admissions coach or no help. So those other conditions. And I want to show that this is a statistically significant relationship. And we also had a whole bunch of other dimensions that we looked at, and we found a consistent pattern. So students and teachers rated applicants using ChatGPT in admissions essays as less ethical, agentic, likable, and authentic than those who received guidance from a college admissions coach. I just want to remind everyone that the essay that they read, that introduction paragraph, was the same across all three conditions, and the only thing that changed was the source of help. So either college admissions coach, no help, or ChatGPT. Interestingly, the only condition where we kind of saw this flip was that students and teachers rated ChatGPT as more accessible than receiving guidance from a college admissions coach. This really indicates something that we were talking about in the beginning, the possibility to level the playing field. We see that ChatGPT and other forms of AI were rated as more accessible than what we think about as a paid college admissions coach or no help at all. I'm going to pass it to Riddhi to kind of walk us through some recommendations and practical applications from the highlight of these findings.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. So now that we've covered what students and teachers told us, let's turn to what this actually means in practical applications. The first set of recommendations that we have are for educators, which we really think should emphasize the ethical use of AI tools in educational settings and integrate AI ethics into their curriculum to help students understand both the benefits and the limitations of these technologies. Our research revealed that students are cautiously adopting these tools, but there are concerns about the authenticity and the ethics of using AI to assist them in their work. And so to address some of that hesitation, educators can help students think about what ethical AI use looks like. For example, they could help students better understand some of the benefits of using these tools, as well as the drawbacks and limitations of what these tools are capable of and what they cannot do or should not be used to do. And educators can also consider incorporating these lessons of AI ethics into their curriculum or into the lessons that they're already doing. And by fostering some of the critical thinking around responsible decision-making about where AI can and cannot be used, educators can help students navigate some of those potential ethical dilemmas and understand the impact of AI on their personal and academic lives. And these discussions and activities about the responsible use of AI can help students uphold academic integrity and use AI tools in a way that enhances rather than undermines their own learning and their own development, which is what teachers want for their students. And while educators may fear that by even discussing these things, they may inadvertently end up encouraging student AI use of these tools, as these tools reach the prevalence that they have and which continues to grow in our lives, it's important for students to be able to learn and understand what responsible and ethical use of these tools looks like and make more informed decisions about how they want to engage with these tools and how they want to engage with AI generated content and make sense of that as well. So with that being said, we have a second set of recommendations for educators, which is to facilitate open dialogue. So our findings indicate that students and teachers had differing perceptions regarding the ethical use of AI tools in the college admissions process. And this discrepancy highlights the need for more open, inclusive conversations among students, teachers, and college admissions administrators to define what ethical AI use looks like in a way that's fair and consistently applied. So addressing these ethical dilemmas in a collaborative environment can foster transparency and trust among all of these different stakeholder groups. And creating these forums for ongoing dialogue is essential as these tools develop further and for developing policies that uphold academic integrity while also recognizing how the role of AI even plays in education as it continues to evolve. And that brings us to our next set of recommendations, which are for universities. So universities, colleges should establish and communicate clear guidelines on the acceptable uses of AI tools in college admissions and apply consistent standards for all forms of writing assistance. And we have some recommendations here for what that could look like. So students and teachers in our study expressed similar levels of agreement on the importance of colleges providing guidelines on the acceptable uses of AI in the admissions process. Things like specifying how AI can be used in writing essays and in recommendation letters, and in ways that maintain academic integrity and uphold even that college's guidelines for academic integrity once you're a student. One common cornerstone of the academic integrity policy is advising students to cite their AI use. However, our results also pointed to a potential inadvertent consequence of that citation of AI use, or AI honesty. And we found that students who openly used AI to help write about their college essays were perceived more negatively than those who did not, even those who still received help from a writing coach. So this bias suggests that colleges and universities must carefully consider how such policies might unfairly disadvantage students and potentially motivate them to hide their AI use. And if colleges and universities require students to cite their use of AI in the college admissions process, they should implement a consistent guideline for all forms of writing support. And our research found that while generative AI tools like ChatGPT provided more accessible assistance for writing college applications essays, they were perceived more negatively than human tutors. And this brings us to our next set of recommendations for universities, which is that it's important to foster awareness of AI use bias. To ensure fairness and transparency, universities should establish uniform guidelines on how students can receive and report the writing assistance that they're getting from all kinds of sources, not just AI tools. And so to address this, institutions could implement a system where students submit a separate statement explaining the types of AI or writing assistance in general that they received, including AI tools, and how these tools helped them. So this statement would be reviewed by a different set of evaluators than those who assess the main application materials and create kind of a double-blind process of student writing materials. And this approach can help ensure transparency and honesty without introducing potential bias in evaluating the applicant's work. So if colleges and universities choose not to do something like this double-blind process, they should educate their admissions officers about how judging AI assistance more harshly than human assistance is a form of discrimination, and one of the nuances of the new age we're in with AI use. And so that brings us to our final set of recommendations, which is to promote equitable access to responsible AI use. Our findings suggest that socioeconomic status may influence AI usage in an interesting way, bringing up some equity considerations for families and educators. So we found that students from families with an annual income of 75 to 100,000 were more likely than students from families making less than an annual income of 50,000 to use AI tools in the college admissions process. And so college preparation services, we also found that the cost of those are around 79 to 340 an hour in the US. And these costs can be prohibitive for many families, making AI potentially a more accessible tool for college admissions. And like learning about those different costs and demographic factors just means that educators should think about integrating AI literacy into their curriculum by offering training sessions on effective, responsible uses of AI, and actually support students in practicing some of those guidelines and responsible uses of AI. And by addressing these equity considerations, educators can help level the playing field by ensuring that all students, regardless of socioeconomic background, know how to appropriately use AI as a resource in the college admissions process in a way that maintains academic integrity.
Thank you, Riddhi. So that wraps up our major findings. Let's go through a few more things. Once again, here is the link QR code on the left to read our white paper with a full set of really extensive recommendations and findings. We also received some press. Just as one example, you can read some of the coverage of our study in EdWeek with this QR code on the right. And I do want to mention that our lab does a lot of other research about generative AI. This was delving into college admissions, but we've done lots of work talking with students and teachers in focus groups and interviews about their experiences with AI in the classroom and beyond. We have a recent white paper out about family experiences with AI. So this was both a focus group study and a survey study exploring caregiver, teacher, and youth perspectives about AI. And in this white paper, we really focused on those family conversations that caregivers can have with the youth and their families about AI, ethical and responsible use, and what that can look like within the family environment. And we have some ongoing experimental work. One is our academic integrity decisions project, in which we're exploring factors that influence student decision-making around AI, and really focusing on how educators can minimize academic integrity and violations. And the AI bias research that we covered today, that was study 1. We have 2 additional studies that are complete, really looking at why this bias persists. And we are about to run a 4th study, really expanding that and finalizing that. So thank you so much. We left plenty of time for questions. This is a QR code for our newsletter at Foundry 10. We have 3 other research labs that cover the gamut of childhood development to thinking about STEM and also thinking about social emotional learning in case you're interested in learning more about our work. And I will open it up for questions now.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm guessing some of our attendees' heads are swirling right now, and that was a lot. It's a lot of findings there. I mean, the implications for some of these findings are just really big, especially, for the people that are here that are attending, college counselors that are, hearing this information and thinking about the conversations that they're having with their current students or the conversations they wish they could have with their students. University reps that are here attending and thinking about those policies that they might not yet have around how they expect prospective students to use, this technology. This is changing so fast, and these findings are only a few months old, but we can assume in just a few months they're going to be pretty old. Do you have plans to replicate this study again? I mean, it would be fascinating, I think, to compare the findings today, what you found here to what it looks like in a year's time. Is there talk about doing that?
A really good question. I think we're going to replicate parts of the study. I think for us, one of the most interesting findings was this bias. We somewhat suspected based on social psychological literature that this might be found, but we didn't really know what was going to happen. I think for us, it was pretty robust, finding it across all the outcomes that we looked at, ranging from authenticity to ethics to thinking about how competent the student is. I think to flag that introduction paragraph to the essay was actually written by ChatGPT, making this all of like a really more interesting finding, that it was just this idea of receiving human help that really kind of led to this bias for that. I think other parts would be really interesting to replicate, and that's something that we can talk about thinking about the next admission cycle, perhaps for this coming year.
Talking a little bit more about that bias, I'm also fascinated by that because I just think that's such a barrier to transparency. It's such a barrier to students being transparent about their usage, college counselors helping students with this technology talk about how they're doing that. Why do you think there is such a bias that exists? I mean, the essay is exactly the same. You should read them and not and think they're the same. But it's clear if we think a computer's done it, we don't like it as much. Why is that the tendency, do you think?
That's great. We've run follow-up studies. I'm going to pass it off to Ella, who can dive a little deeper into why this is happening.
Yeah, so we actually ran some additional experiments looking at mechanisms, so looking at why do we think this effect occurs. And what we find really consistently is that it's a combination of perceiving that a student who uses AI help rather than human help is working less hard, is less authentic, and that their approach is less fair to other students. And we kind of, all of those measures are really like extremely related and correlated. So we actually combine those into a measure that we're calling perceived student integrity. So there's something about choosing to use AI that's leading to people thinking of that student as fundamentally different, as writing less authentically, working less hard, taking less fair of a less fair approach. even though, like Jen said, it's the same exact product and the help is being described identically. It's not like we're saying that ChatGPT wrote the entire thing for the student and that the human only helped a little bit. Like the help is identical, the product is identical, but it's impacting how that person is, how that student is being perceived.
Along the same lines, you talked about how when a student is working on, you compared how a student working on their own, a student with human assistance, and then a student using ChatGPT assistance. I think there's a fourth category, and I might be interested in how a subsequent study looks at that. And how is it viewed when a qualified human counselor works in conjunction with AI? So they're using it, but they're using it in an ethical way to help walk their students through this process. And from my personal experience, that kind of puts a counselor at a huge advantage because it, opens all these additional tools for their toolkit. But do you have any inkling of how, if that would be viewed differently because there is still a human element, or what would you expect if that was a fourth element in your study?
That's such a good question. I definitely want to write that down and think about whether we should explore that in the future. I personally think that having some sort of human supervision over the AI help would probably help to reduce the bias effect that we see. I'm guessing that it would give people more trust in, again, that student isn't working less hard, all of these kind of like things that are associated with choosing to use ChatGPT. I'm guessing if there was human oversight, it might help. But I'm not sure. That's speculation. We would have to collect data to see. This bias is like pretty robust across different contexts and doesn't seem to go away even if the student is honest about their use of AI. So another potential outcome is maybe it wouldn't matter. Maybe just having AI involved in the process at all would cause this bias to persist. I think we don't really know. Jen, do you want to add anything?
No, I think that's great. I think just to clarify the last part, we did run a study, looking at the different outcomes, confidence in particular, and we had the student actually cite that they either had human help or AI in those conditions, and still the bias persisted against the student being really transparent and honest, which clearly, as an educator myself, is something that we encourage. We want our students to cite what sources they're using or like forms of help. So it's really kind of counterintuitive to think that this is like the dominant message in education, but even if students are honest and transparent, they're still receiving this bias against their work and negative perceptions against their competence as a person and a student.
Were you surprised that 30% of students are using this in the college admission process? Did that seem low? Did that seem high? Did you have no expectations going in? What kind of was your perception about that percentage of usage?
We did not know really going in what that number would be. I could actually see the number being higher. There's like a phenomenon that happens often when you're taking research called social desirability bias. So it's this idea that you want to appear more appealing or attractive to the person that's going to be reading your survey, and people might have this like fear or like hidden negative backlash against AI, like this bias that we're seeing. So maybe they reported it less than what they're actually using the tool for. So I could imagine that number being higher, both for students and for teachers. I won't necessarily say I'm surprised. I think that number is going to grow with time as these tools become more accessible, available, and students are getting more information about them. Anyone else want to add? Yeah, go ahead, Ricky.
I would say we weren't completely surprised, or we didn't know what the ballpark would be, but the reason that we did this study is because it was inspired by doing focus groups with both educators and students earlier, like around the release of ChatGPT, just about their general perceptions and uses of these tools. And those conversations were with high school students, and so they were citing like, oh, like I could use it to brainstorm for my college admissions work. And then similarly, when we were talking to teachers and they're like, oh, I've definitely used it to support with my letter recommendation writing. So we knew that there was some use already happening there, and that's what sparked this study. But also with the students, we heard a lot of hesitance. Like at that point in time, everyone was giving a lot of negative messaging, I think, around like, if you're using this, you're definitely cheating. You should not use this. It lies to you kind of stuff. So there was a lot of hesitance in student reporting when they were talking to us. But again, like Jen said, that might have also been social desirability bias at play in our conversations with students. So we didn't really know what to expect with a number, but we did know like they were contemplating using it.
Yeah, whenever I present to students, I like to ask the question, how many of you have used AI in the application process? And pretty consistently, nobody raises their hand, because here I am, a university rep who's going to be reading their applications, reading their essays, coming in and asking that question. And after I ask that question, then I launch into a talk about how there's very few safe spaces for them where they can disclose their usage. I think a lot of this is for the high school counselor in the room. You talked a little bit about that today, about the importance of guidance, the lack of guidance that students are currently receiving. One of the things I wanted to share with our participants is here. I'm putting it in the chat. I'm trying to compile all of the universities that have policies that are specific to AI in college admission. So this is not the university-wide policy on how the staff or faculty should use artificial intelligence, but this is on how the admission office, recommends usage by a prospective student. If you've clicked on that link, you'll see it's pretty short. It's only, I think I have 11 schools on there, maybe 10 schools. I just added Cornell. It's not exhaustive. If you're sitting here today and your university has a policy and you don't see it listed there, please, let me know. I'm trying to add all of the universities there. But there's definitely a spectrum in terms of what those policies look like. The majority are pretty superficial, use it in ethical ways, don't use it in unethical ways. Some of them go even deeper and give specific examples of what is ethical and what is not ethical. If you're looking for one of those examples, check out Caltech, Georgia Tech. They have pretty good ones. An example of one that I would say is not very good is BYU. They are banning the usage of AI in all regards, and actually banning the paying for any assistance with in your essay writing process. So essentially, it's also throwing out any usage of a private college coach. But for universities who are right now considering kind of, a policy, knowing that they need to have this, knowing that that's the next wave is universities that will be coming out with these policies, what do you recommend in terms of making sure that policy is adequately addressing the issues in your study, making sure this document, these policies are really doing what they need to be doing in terms of helping students understand how they can apply to the university in an ethical way while using this new technology? Do you have any recommendations there?
I'll start off and then I'll open it up to everyone else. I think one of the strongest recommendations I have is that universities that have clear, consistent policies that are direct and provide examples about what responsible and ethical use looks like. This is a really large challenge right now in schools. So thinking about high school and middle school, where these tools are really kind of emerging and starting to be used, that those policies are so different between classrooms, they're different between schools and districts, and different between districts and states. It really makes a confusing puzzle for students to know what is responsible and ethical use. I mean, my pipe dream would be to have that all universities, I know this will never happen, and colleges have the same policy regarding AI use in writing help, just because we know that students apply to often so many colleges. So if you have to tailor your essay for everyone, some ban the use of AI, some don't, it makes it a really challenging kind of space for students to work in. And the last thing I'll mention before opening up to anyone else on the panel is that we as a lab and through our evidence-based findings as well as the research body literature overall do not support bans of technology. And I mean this with thinking about AI, but I also mean social media. I also mean cell phones overall. I think our large kind of perspective as researchers is that we should be teaching students healthy and responsible digital habits and providing them space to practice what those look like, as well as have guardrails from educators and caregivers and parents, guidance counselors, school counselors, anyone else we can think of that are in those children's lives. I think doing an outright ban is a disservice because we knew that these tools, in particular generative AI, is going to have a larger part in our workforce and future career readiness and job training. And we should really be providing those kind of scaffolding and sources early on in students' educational careers. Okay, does anyone else want to add anything? Ritzy, Catherine, Ella?
I do want to speak to one other piece of why an outright ban might not be the most logistically feasible, regardless of your perspective on AI, which is just that AI detection tools are inaccurate, have high error rates, and just generally are not a super great way to go, which makes some of these policies fundamentally unenforceable, right? Like if you can't tell whether students used AI to write an essay, outright banning the use of all types of AI is just it's not something that can be enforced on the back end. And so that's another reason that we tend to recommend that folks use more nuanced approaches to really try to nudge students towards what we see as like more ethical, using AI as a learning tool and as an assistant and a source of help, but not as like a replacement for learning or for your own authentic voice, rather than just trying to get rid of it altogether. And I'll also just say, like, it's interesting that you mentioned, Emily, the BYU example. On the one hand, like, at least they also ban the use of paid coaches, right? Like, at least that's like a bit of an equalizing factor. But then when you go a little deeper, there is no true equalizing, because some people have parents and friends and teachers who are very experienced with this process and can offer really, really high level help, and other people don't have access to that, right? So ChatGPT and other AI tools do provide a really exciting, more accessible source of help for students if they're used well, and if students have the skills to use them as like an assistant to their own learning and to their own expression of who they are. So I'll just say that.
I am so glad you brought up AI detection, because I was kind of working into how we would bring that up. There's several questions, that came up from the audience about AI detection. And I really think the fear of AI detection is something that is paralyzing educators. I mean, there are many high school counselors that talk to me and they say, I'm so afraid of recommending these tools and working with a student, even in ethical ways. One of the fears is, what if I put their essay into ChatGPT just to get some feedback and to work on it ethically? Isn't that putting it out there into the ether, and now the AI detection software is going to flag it? That is not how AI detection software works. It is not finding exact text. It's just a prediction of what the next word will be. And coming from the university side, and coming from having hundreds of conversations about this with university reps, I have yet to find a university that is saying, yes, we are using AI detection and it's working. I have talked to many universities that have told me they've tried to use it and it didn't work. A great example, I talked to a college rep. They were noticing that more essays appeared to be AI generated. They started using, I think it was ChatGPT 0, which is supposed to be one of the best AI detection softwares. And the results were coming back 65 to 70% of all applicants were using AI. So they went back to the table and said, well, we can't possibly throw out 70% of our applicants, that we won't have an incoming freshman class. And one person had the brilliant idea, let's pull an essay from 2017. ChatGPT didn't exist. Let's run it through. They ran a really quality one, and they ran it through, and it was 70% AI generated was the results. And they immediately realized they could not trust ChatGPT 0. What they had going on is their applicants are about 60 to 70% international students. And what AI detection is really good at is flagging ESL learners, student neurodivergent learners. Those students are flagged at a higher rate. And universities know that. We might have tried to use it. We might have, like this university did, put it into play for a little bit. But the truth is, it's not good, and it's not going to get better, because AI is just getting more advanced. At this point, it can essentially write a PhD dissertation. And there are studies that show when human readers look at studies that are generated by ChatGPT, they have a hard time distinguishing, a human-generated written study versus a ChatGPT written study. So keep that in mind. I think I have heard people like, admission reps like myself out there telling the college counseling community that they're using AI detection. But my thoughts on that is it's more of a lack of educating that person on how to talk about AI. So if your office isn't training your admission counselors of what to say when somebody asks, should I use AI in the college admission process? How should I use it? Are you using detection? That's a problem, because they're making up answers right now, and we need to work on that training. Going back just a moment to the policy, I just also wanted to mention, that question was kind of geared towards universities creating policies, but the lack of such policies is also creating really a fear among high school college counselors. And I kind of already mentioned that, but there was a great response to one of my polls in the chat, because I had asked, like, are you able to ethically guide students through that process? And one of of our attendees here today. She said, well, no, how can we ethically guide them if we don't know how to guide them because we haven't been provided that guidance from universities? So I'm really seeing this as kind of like a top-down problem. It's like a trickle-down problem. There's enrollment directors who are just, they've been there for 20, 30 years. Their processes work. We don't need to do anything with AI. Their office isn't talking about it. People in that office are using AI, but they're not feeling comfortable talking about how they're using it. And that's trickling down all the way to those prospective students who are just now lacking guidance, in terms of how to use that. I want to be aware of our time here. But, in terms of some guidance, we kind of talked about the high school side, but do you have guidance for high schools, college counselors who are sitting here today and they want to have those conversations with students? Many of them might be thinking there's, perceiving that their students are using this, but haven't yet kind of bridged that gap, that need of talking about this. Do you have any kind of suggestions for those people that are with us here this evening?
I think that's great. So I think it's so important to have transparency. We have programming at Foundry 10, and we ran an AI Together program with caregivers and students recently to kind of have this open conversation. And I think this translates to college admissions counselors. I think it's important to be transparent. You can be about like, if you use AI and how, what responsible use looks like for you, and then translate that into a student's kind of guidance. I think we have a lot of really strong existing resources that can guide college admissions counselors on what responsible and ethical use looks like. One of those is from Digital Promise. They have a really strong AI education guidelines and framework that I think is really applicable to college students and those applying to college. So please go ahead and check it out. I think that will provide you a good framework to kind of open some of these conversations. Common Sense Media has been another great source of AI literacy and content. And I think another possible thing to really kind of mention here is to also talk about like the benefits and challenges of using AI. One of the big things is that AI could produce hallucinations. And I think this is like really, really important for everyone to know, including students. When we talk with students, they often think that whatever AI gives them is factually correct. They think that generative AI works like Google, for example, like you put in a query, it spits you back a result, not realizing that it's predicative in nature. It's not just like Google. So therefore, it can provide misinformation, disinformation, and reproduce bias. I think that's really important to note with college admissions counselors talking to students. I also think it's really important to kind of highlight that, the really whole benefit of writing our college admissions essay is to show who we are as a student, to show what we like, what we don't like, what we want to pursue, what we're passionate about. And oftentimes AI cannot reproduce that voice, that really spark that makes you who you are as a student. It's a really great writing partner, writing help, and really kind of just talking about what those boundaries are. It can maybe provide really good information about editing. Did I use the right sentence structure to talk about something that was important in my life? Do I need to have it as like a partner to help me brainstorm ideas to continue this essay based on what I want to really communicate? But really never having it be a replacement for writing is something that's also really important to talk to students with. So just be open, be transparent, understand what responsible and ethical use looks like with your college and university's policies. If you don't have one, once again, return to those frameworks and really make sure that students are on the same page about what AI can be done or not done within the realm of what policies say at the university or college. Anyone else want to add anything? I don't know. Anyone else on the panel?
I guess all I would add is like college counselors, just what Jen was saying is making students feel confident in their own voice and knowing what it is and making sure it's represented. I'm sure in the teachers that we talked to that some of them were using really creative methods of collaborating with these AI tools to brainstorm, and a lot of students cited really enjoying having something to put their ideas in. And some of these uses are like, okay, and I guess that would be up to the probably English department and stuff at their school for determining, and college counselors probably pulling them in to see what policies that they're setting in their school about what ethical and what AI literacy even looks like. But students really enjoyed having that sounding board, and so knowing that students are using it in that way. But then I think the college counselor is there to like make sure students feel supported and know that their like authentic voice is what colleges are wanting to hear. And so ways of making sure that that shines through their application, and that these tools, that's one of their limitations, is that if you want to sound like a robot, that's a great you can copy and paste the essay in, but if you really want your authentic voice to shine through, that's one of the limitations of these tools. And yeah, that guidance I think is one of the things that we're calling for when we're saying like access to using these tools and access to the literacy to know how to use them well, and be a good collaborator with them, which is also probably just a skill to take into college with you.
Awesome. Yeah. The only thing I'd add to that is also talk to your college reps. If you're a college counselor, you have reps coming in for these high school visits, and we all have that time when the visit's over and we have a few minutes to chat. If you're a high school college counselor, ask questions about AI, ask what that institution is doing with it. The rep might not have an answer, but they're going to take that back to their office and say, hey, this is coming up. More people are asking about this. I think it's important that we are talking about it more. There's definitely a lot of silence going on. So talk about it with your university reps, ask them what they're doing, ask them if they have a policy. I think that's a good step too. I want to thank our panelists. This has been really interesting for me. There couldn't be a study better aligned with our AI in college admissions group. So it's such an honor to us to have you, on this webinar. I did drop a couple more links into the chat. We have an excellent calendar of our events. We have a webinar coming up the next one's going to be April 9th, Future Proofing Admissions, Compliance with Emerging AI Regulations. So a lot of new regulations coming out. What is your institution doing with those regulations? We have an event calendar. We've got this education, AI and education event calendar. So this isn't only relating to college admissions. We try to grab as many events as we can possibly find and populate our Google Calendar at that second link. And if you have a great webinar idea, or if you want to contribute more to this group, I also included our email address. We would love to hear from you. Thank you so much to all of our attendees as well. If it wasn't for you, we wouldn't do this. We hope that you learned something new this afternoon, this evening, wherever you are. And we hope that we'll have in-person contact with you at conferences coming up or at events that we're at. Thank you again, panelists. We hope to see you all soon. Bye.